God made man in his image. All those who know how to receive him can realize the divinity sleeping within them by expanding the powers of the mind. Being children of God, we have potential dominion over all things in his universe, even as he has. The question arises, why is it that many of our wishes are not fulfilled, and that many of God's children suffer intensely? God, with his divine impartiality, could not make one child better than another. He originally made all souls alike and in his image. They also received the greatest gifts of God, freedom of the will and power to reason and to act accordingly. Somewhere, sometime in the past, men have broken the various laws of God and accordingly have brought about lawful results. All men have been given absolute liberty to use human reason wrongly or rightly. Misuse of God-given reason leads to sin, which is the cause of suffering. The right use leads to virtue, the precursor of happiness. God, with his infinite nobility, would not punish us. We punish ourselves through our own unreasonable actions and reward ourselves through our own good conduct. This alone explains why God's responsibility ended when he endowed man with reason and with free will. Man has misused this God-given independence and thus has brought upon himself ignorance, physical suffering, premature death, and other ills. He reaps what he sows. The law of cause and effect applies to all lives. All the todays in one's life are determined by the actions of all the yesterdays, and all the tomorrows of one's life depend upon the way in which all the todays are handled and lived. Thus, it is that man, although created in the image of God and potentially endowed with his powers, loses his claim and birthright to dominion over his Father's universe through his own faults and self-imposed limitations. The misuse of reason and the identification of the soul with the transitory body or with environmental or hereditary or world influences are responsible for man's despairs and miseries. Yet the fact remains that every human being, however wrong outwardly, is potentially a son of God. Even the greatest of sinners is but an unawakened son of God, a sleeping immortal, who refuses fully to receive his light by clarifying his consciousness. In John 1:12 we find written, "But as many as received him, to them gave he power to become the sons of God, even to them that believe on his name." The ocean cannot be received in a cup unless the cup is made as large as the ocean. Likewise, the cup of human concentration and human faculties must be enlarged in order to comprehend God. Receiving denotes capacity acquired by self-development. It is different from mere belief. The purport of St. John's words is that those sleeping sons of God who awake, by following the law of spiritual discipline, receive or feel God by developed intuition, and thus regain their latent powers as sons of God. It is ignorance that prompts man to imagine his littleness and limitations. Ignorance is the sin of all sins. It is the man sleeping in delusion who acknowledges and emphasizes his dream of human weaknesses. It is wrong for a soul, in the garb of the ego, to believe itself limited by the body, instead of knowing itself as part of the unlimited spirit. It is good and right to believe that one is a son of God, rather than the son of a mortal only, for it is metaphysically true that man is essentially made in the image of God. It is an error, therefore, for one to imagine that he is a perishable creature. Even by belief alone, one may gradually cultivate his intuitive knowing and someday realize his true soul nature as a son of God. Hence, a wayward child must start by believing this truth, as belief is the initial condition for testing and knowing a truth. When in trouble, one automatically prays to an unknown God and expects relief. If freed from trouble, even incidentally, he believes his prayers were heard and responded to by God. But should his prayer request remain ungranted, he becomes confused and begins to lose faith in God. My purpose in presenting these sacred demands, received in the course of my various fruitful communions with our Father, is to enable my fellow beings to contact him effectually. I prefer the word demand to prayer, because the former is devoid of the primitive and medieval conception of a kingly tyrant God whom we, as beggars, have to supplicate and flatter. There is a great deal of beggary and ignorance in ordinary prayer. People pray haphazardly. Few know how to pray and touch God with their prayers, nor do they know whether their prayers are responded to or not, or whether things happened unaffected by prayers, nor do they distinguish between things that they need and things that they want. Sometimes it is very good that we do not receive what we think we want. A child may want to touch a flame, but to save it from harm, the mother does not grant the child's wish. God, though all-powerful, does not act unlawfully or arbitrarily merely because one prays. He has given independence to man, who does with it what he pleases. To forgive human shortcomings so that man can continue his misbehavior without consequences would mean that God contradicts himself, disregards the law of cause and effect as applied to the law of action, and handles human lives not according to the laws created by himself, but according to his whim. Nor can God be moved by flattery or by praise to change the course of his immutable laws. Must we then live without the intercession of the grace and mercy of God and remain helpless victims of human frailties? Must we then inevitably face the fruits of our actions as if by preordination or so-called fate? No, the Lord is both law and love. The devotee who with pure devotion and faith seeks the unconditional love of God and who also brings his actions into harmony with divine law will surely receive the purifying, mitigating touch of God. Any sin and its consequence can be forgiven the repentant devotee who loves God deeply enough and thereby puts his life in tune with the all-compassionate Lord. The best way lies neither in begging for favors or for amnesty from evil results, nor in being resigned and sitting idle, inviting the law of action to take its course. What is done by ourselves can be undone by ourselves. We must adopt the proper antidotes for our poisonous actions. For example, ill health can often be overcome by obeying laws of good health. But when chronic diseases and sufferings are beyond the control of human care, when the power of human methods fails to cure ills, physical or mental, revealing its limitations, then we must ask God to help, He who is unlimited in power, and we must lovingly demand as sons of God and not as beggars. Every begging prayer, no matter how sincere, limits the soul. As sons of God, we must believe that we have everything the Father has. This is our birthright. Jesus realized the truth. I and my Father are one. That is why he had dominion over everything, even as his Father had. Most of us beg and pray without first establishing, in our own minds, our divine birthright. That is why we are limited by the law of beggary. We do not have to beg, but to reclaim and demand from our Father that which we, through our human imagination, thought to be lost. It becomes necessary at this stage to destroy the wrong thought of ages, that we are frail human beings. We must think, meditate, affirm, believe, and realize daily that we are sons of God, and behave accordingly. This realization may take time, but we must begin with the right method, rather than gamble with the unscientific beggary of prayers and consequently be subject to disbelief, doubts, or the jugglery of superstition. It is only when the slumbering ego perceives itself not as a body, but as a free soul or son of God, residing in and working through the body, that it can rightfully and lawfully demand its divine rights. These sacred demands reveal a few of the attitudes of the soul that have met with successful response from God. However, it is not enough merely to demand in another's language. One should not rely on a book on love when he meets his beloved, but should use the spontaneous language of his heart. If one uses another's language of love in demands addressed to God, he must make the words his own, by thoroughly understanding and dwelling upon their meaning and applying to them the utmost concentration and love. Even as it is not amiss when a lover addresses his beloved in the language of a great poet and enlivens those words with his own love and feeling. Blind repetition of demands or affirmations without concomitant devotion or spontaneous love makes one merely a praying Victrola, which does not know what its prayer means. Grinding out prayers vocally and mechanically while inwardly thinking of something else does not bring response from God. A blind repetition, taking the name of God in vain, is fruitless. Repeating a demand or prayer over and over again, mentally or orally, and with deepening attention and devotion, spiritualizes the prayer and changes conscious, believing repetition into superconscious experience. The divine being cannot be deceived by a mockery of prayer, because he is the fountain of thoughts. He cannot be bribed at any time, yet it is easy to move him with sincerity, persistency, concentration, devotion, determination, and faith. Furthermore, repeating a long intellectual prayer with the mind absent develops hypocrisy, and to pray or demand without understanding develops ignorance, fanaticism, and superstition. Repeating a demand with deepening concentration and faith is not mechanical repetition, but a changing, progressing power and mental preparation which step by step scientifically reaches God. These sacred demands are logical, devotional, deep soul outbursts. If one prepares the mind by concentration and then deeply, with ever-increasing faith and devotion, mentally or aloud, in congregations, affirms these scientific divine demands, one is bound to receive results. To re-establish your unity with the Divine Father as a Son of God is your most important demand. Realize this truth, and you will have received everything. After sowing the demand seed in the soil of faith, do not dig it up now and then in order to examine it, or it will never germinate to fulfillment. Sow your demand seed in faith and water it by repeated daily practices in demanding rightly. Never be discouraged if results are not forthcoming immediately. Stand firm in your demands, and you will regain your lost divine heritage, and then only will the great satisfaction visit your heart. Demand until you establish your divine rights. Demand unceasingly that which belongs to you, and you will receive it. In demanding rightly, there is no room for superstition, disappointment, or doubt. Once you learn to operate the right chain of causation that effectually moves God, you will know that He was not hiding from you, but that you were hiding from Him behind the shadow of self-created darkness. Once you feel, through intuitive knowing, that you are a son of God, then by the steady effort of mental discipline and devotional meditation, you will have dominion over all things. If your demand remains unfulfilled, unanswered, you can blame only yourself and your past actions. Do not become despondent. Do not say that you have resigned yourself to fate or to the preordained commands of a whimsical God, but try, with increased effort after each failure, to get what you have not, what you did not receive because of your own fault, but what is yours already in spirit. Demand with sacred devotion the recognition of your divine birthright as a son of God. To know exactly how and when to pray, according to the nature of our needs, is what brings the desired results. When the right method is applied, it sets in motion the proper laws of God. The operation of these laws scientifically bears results. Select a demand from the contents according to your need. Sitting motionless on a straight chair, with spine erect, calm your mind. For as a wet match cannot be ignited, so a mind saturated with doubt and restlessness is unable to produce the fire of concentration, even when prodigious efforts are made to strike the cosmic spark. The flame of inspiration is hidden within the lines of the prayer demands in this book, but since they are presented through the mute medium of printer's ink, paper, and intellectual meanings, one must use his own intuition and devotion to bring forth their inner illumining flame. By the Christ command of your deep intuitional perception, resurrect the inmost substance of words from the sepulchre of hollow, intellectual concepts. Different minds reading the same prayer may interpret it differently. The vast ocean of truth can be measured and perceived only according to the capacity of one's own intelligence and perception. Similarly, the inspiration behind these prayer demands will be felt according to the depths of one's own intuition and feeling. In order to benefit fully from the God warmth within these prayer demands, one should take only a paragraph at a time from any demand, mentally picture the meaning, visualize the imagery of the figure of speech, and meditate deeply on it until the fiery essence emerges, free from word limitations. One may wish to read a complete prayer demand to get a quick view of its entire meaning. But if he will then reread it over and over again, many times, and then with closed eyes repeatedly try to feel the deep inspiration behind and within it, he will spiritualize that prayer. That is, rouse the inspiration slumbering beneath the thick silken quilt of words. With eyes closed and lifted to the point of spiritual concentration between the eyebrows, meditate on the meaning of the demand you have selected until it becomes a part of you. Saturate the demand with devotion as you meditate upon it. As your meditation becomes deeper, increase your devotion and mentally offer the demand as your own heart's outburst. Imbue yourself with faith that your heart's craving, expressed through this specific demand, is being felt by God. Feel that just behind the screen of your devotional demand God is listening to the silent words of your soul. Feel this. Be one with your heart's demand, and be thoroughly convinced that He has listened to you. Then go about your duties, seeking not to know whether God will grant your demand. Believe absolutely that your demand has been heard, and that you will know that what is God's is yours also. Unceasingly meditate on God, and when you feel Him, you will acquire your rightful inheritance as His divine Son. These demands were given to me by the Universal Father. They are not mine. I only felt them and gave them expression through the avenue of words that I might share them with you. My blessing goes with them, and I pray that they may strike an answering note on the living harpstrings of your heart, so that you may feel them just as I have felt them. Prayer demands are like ever-living plants that ceaselessly put forth new blossoms. A prayer plant retains the same branches of words, but daily yields fresh roses of God feeling and inspiration if one regularly waters the plant with meditation. The prayer plant must also be protected from the ravages of doubt, distraction, mental idleness, leaving meditation until tomorrow, the morrow that never comes, absent-mindedness, and thinking of something else, while imagining that the mind is wholly on the soul force of a prayer. Such parasites on the prayer plants should be destroyed by faith, devotion to God, self-control, determination, and loyalty to a teaching. Roses of immortal inspiration may then be gathered daily from the plants of these prayer demands. O seeker after soul awakening, be still and let God answer you through your intuition-tuned soul. Learn to know Him by knowing your true self.